Loved giving them, she loved going to them, and that's why we've called this farewell to her a party. She's certainly here in spirit and would be so pleased to see all of you at her party. So thank you for coming. Thank you for caring so much about her. Thank you. Thank you for coming to her party. Thank you for caring so much about her and for missing her as my father and Christopher, Kasha, Kelly, Catherine, Caroline, her siblings, Tommy, Betsy, Saint, and me, all do as well. So this is a family gathering. We are in the courtyard of the National Portrait Gallery because for so many years the gallery was a family that she belonged to. She loved belonging to. We are here because the director of the Portrait Gallery was kind enough to treat Pi, my mother, as a family member and to offer us the use of the courtyard and the gallery's invaluable staff for this occasion. Thank you, Kim, for such a generous gift, and to the rest of the staff who have made this such a wonderful morning. As our hostess this morning, Kim Syed will welcome you with a few words about my mother. Thank you, Kim.
Good morning. As we said, my name is Kim Syed and I'm the director of the National Portrait Gallery, a museum for people, by people, about people. A museum that was loved by Pi Friendly, who was a people person, if ever there was one, and that loved her back. As I look out into the audience and see the past and present staff, board members and supporters of the NPG, I realised that you could create a Venn diagram with interlocking circles, a pie of sorts. With one slice being people from the cultural community of Washington, DC, another slice being people who love history, art and biography, and a third slice being people who are associated with the National Portrait Gallery. And in the middle of that diagram would be Pi Friendly. She was the centre of our world, the human equivalent of the mathematical constant of our friendship circle, a transcendental person who can never be repeated and will continue to live in our hearts ad infinitum. I still remember when I came in contact with this magical person, and it was around Valentine's Day of 2013, and I had just been announced in the press as the new director of the NPG. However, I wasn't feeling the love. A number of the board members of the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, where I had been president and CEO for the past 7 years, were pretty crabby that I was leaving. And out of the blue, I get an email from someone called Pi Friendly? Well, so let's face it, you just can't help but opening such a missive. Today, I would think such a name too improbable and probably delete it out of fear of being spammed. But back then, I hadn't yet taken the truly terrifying mandatory online courses that the Smithsonian make you take every year about email. You know, the ones where opening a suspiciously worded message by an improbably named sender would probably lead you to the single-handedly opening the digital door to the secrets of our federal government and the destruction of democracy itself. So I opened it. What followed was a spirited exchange with Pi, who welcomed me to the museum, told me that she and her husband Alfred wanted to host a party for me when I arrived, and proceeded to chat about how she couldn't wait to introduce me to everyone. Honestly, all those would-be hackers of government secrets, the Pi-friendly mode of communication should be studied as a masterclass in winning hearts and minds with a few chatty strokes of a keyboard. My friend Susanna Quinn, who's here with us this morning, shared an email that she wrote to Andrew, who was a classmate of hers from the 8th grade. She called Pi the ultimate welcomer. She's, quote, Pi immediately put me at ease to the extent that I think I might have actually thought she was my mum at various times. She would answer the door with her gorgeous hair smelling like a tea rose, and it made it feel like home. She gave so many people the feeling of home. Pi not only made people feel welcome, but also needed, and this made her a perfect person to run the External Affairs Office at the museum. According to her co-worker, Anne Wagner, quote, she had a gift for charming difficult people into trusting her with information that no one else could get. And it appears also cheerfully agreeing to give her their money. I believe Mark Pachter is here today, my wonderful directorial predecessor who did so much for this organisation, including raising the money to purchase the Lansdowne portrait and name this building. And while I have yet to learn the real intricate details, I understand that Pi bonded with Fred Smith, organised tours of the NPG, and had he and his wife over for dinner. What a persuasive duo Mark and Pi must have been. How could the Smiths, who eventually left us $75 million, resist such charming brilliance? Not that it was always easy. On one of her birthdays, Wendy Wick-Reeves, curator emeritus of prints and drawings, composed some lines of verse for her about dealing with commissioners. One lost his way, another his wife. The electricity's out. You call this a life? Herding commissioners to the 6 different venue can make a girl crazy. In fact, it can send you up a wall. External affairs, who the hell cares? It's mostly disasters in need of repairs. When I arrived at the NPG, Wendy was the acting director, and we worked together for many years before she retired and began the transition from paid worker to volunteer worker and joined the Emeriti. The Emeriti, which I do think is somewhat like the Illuminati, are a super special, mysterious club made up of former staffers who until very recently had their own carols in the Victor building, and they organised their time so they would all come into work on the same day. And Pi was at the centre of this group, along with Caroline Carr, Ellen Miles, Beverly Cox, and others. I soon came to appreciate the absolute genius of this system. Not only did the Emeriti know absolutely everything about the museum and the gossip around town, they knew all the great portraits were hidden and would work for free. It was like having a pro bono army of experts at your fingertips who would bring cookies and pies. Which leads me to the one project that Pi and I truly conspired on, Pi Fest. It has now become a competitive sport. Held generally just before Thanksgiving, Pi Fest involves staff bringing in a pie in one of 2 categories, sweet or savoury, and with so many staff, you can easily have 60 pies at one event. A prize is awarded and the winner has the glory of a pie dish trophy. See here. And it's signed with the winners on the back. There are 2 of them. We introduced the savoury category a little while later. I still can't actually remember how Pi and I came up with this, but it's become a highlight of my year, and I suspect that it's one of the reasons that the camaraderie of the NPG staff is at the envy of many of the other Smithsonian museums. Although I do have to say, and there's a caveat here, there's recently been a slight disturbance in the universe with the NPG staff, and it was the most important topic of the meeting, by the way, voting to move Pi Day, Pi Fest Day, to March the 14th, the actual Pi Day, and I was kind of crushed, but I was voted out from that. Pi had such an amazingly positive attitude on life, and so I wanted to leave you with this poem by D.D.K. Waking with joyful exuberance, choosing what attitude to wear with the day. Grey skies call for sunny disposition, determined to keep negatives away. Light streams gently from fingertips, delicately touching others with warmth, surprising them with smiles, unfurling calm in your wake. That was Pi. She was our constant, who was at least 3.14 times more powerful than anyone else. And and whose influence will continue to live with all of us forever.
Charles Cole has been a family member since 1971, when he was assigned to the British Embassy, and Carla, his wonderful wife, would eat hamburgers and French fries with pie, and a number of toddlers, including me and their son Hugh, at Roy Rogers on Wisconsin Avenue. After many years, not days, years, at number 10, with England's first female Prime Minister, Charles is familiar with strong women. Carla and pie fit that bill. So thank you, Charles, very much for all sorts of kindnesses to my mother and our family over many years, and for speaking to us today.
Well, Alfred and Christopher and Andrew, thank you very much for the privilege of allowing me to come here and speak. I speak occasionally in the House of Lords, which is a chamber which is quite awesome in its way. This, I must say, one could get very hooked at speaking in this sort of thing, but I'm not sure it would be good for democratic politics. And thank you also for the magnificent display of photographs. I particularly like the one in which Pi puts Stalin, Churchill and Roosevelt in the shade. That is absolutely quite right. That reflects history very well. Now, my wife Carla regarded Pi as her best friend on earth. Sadly, Carla's health makes it impossible for her to be here today to tell the story of their friendship. I will tell it for her in her own words. Our friendship started on the day I moved into our house on 32nd and Q in Georgetown as a young and newly arrived diplomatic wife. I was out of my mind, unpacking our possessions, coping with 2 small children. In the way that husbands always do, mine had a pressing reason why he couldn't possibly be there to help me. And as I held one small child while struggling with the other, who was being very naughty, often still is, a car drew up. A lady stepped out, asking if there was any way she could help. It was, of course, Pa, and help she did by bearing the children off to Roy Rogers, in which they became lifetime devotees. That story says so much about Pa, stopping to help a stranger in distress with exquisite southern courtesy, and with no idea who she was. And it was the beginning of a friendship with Pi and Alfred, which has endured over 50 years. At the beginning, it was played out in the garden of the friendly home on 31st Street, full of children on climbing frames, grandmothers playing bridge, younger and fitter ones on the tennis court, a constant coming and going of journalists, politicians and diplomats, alive with the latest news of Vietnam and Watergate. What an introduction it was to life in DC, and Pi was always at the heart of it all. There were escapades of all sorts. I recall particularly Pi forming a ferocious gang of mainly diplomatic ladies who made the Bloods and the Crips of Los Angeles look like sissies. Our favourite shakedown was Madame Moy's Chinese kitchen. The deal was that she would teach us Chinese cookery and how to prepare the dishes and serve them to her customers. Within a week, we had Madame Moy herself doing the cooking, while we smoked and gossiped before eating the meal we were supposed to cook and serve to others. There were wonderful parties culminating in a joint one to make the friendliest departure for Moscow and ours to the embassy in Germany. It ended in the early hours when Pi and my husband, as responsible citizens, clearing up the debris, while Alfred and I were stretched out on chaise longue, smoking, well, perhaps not quite close to the FBI. The friendship continued well beyond the Washington years. I have happy memories of a joint family expedition to Sicily, tracing earlier invasions by the Phoenicians, the Carthaginians, the Greeks, the Arabs, and the Normans. As always, Pi was our leader, delivering withering verdicts on my husband's driving and on Alfred's navigation. Cosa Nostra were meanwhile taking no chances and stayed firmly indoors. It was a most memorable and enjoyable holiday, directed and produced by Pi. And then I recall Pi taking control of the House of Lords at my husband's investiture, putting a modest fellow guest, Margaret Thatcher, in her place with some crisp Southern advice, before conjuring up ceremonial robes for my husband, decorated with Brussels sprouts, with ermine made from cauliflower and a tiara made of carrots. The House of Lords had seen nothing like it in over 1,000 years. Pi's greatest quality was her ability to make other people's lives happier, merrier, and richer. She was eternally welcoming and hospitable, and generations of foreign friends came to love Washington and love the United States because they loved Pi. The rolling wave of love and affection which greeted Pi's passing, as well as the grief for the devastation which Alfred, Christopher, and Andrew and all family must feel, has moved us all. But of one thing I am sure, as a good Catholic, up in heaven they'll be having a damn fine party, and Pi will be the life of the soul. Thank you.
Anne-Marie Slaughter joined our family in the summer between her junior and senior year at Princeton's Woodrow Wilson School. I remember because she took my bedroom. I wasn't there, I was living somewhere else. She was then an intern on the subcommittee of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Joe Biden was its chairman. He's moved on to other things. And my father was a staff member. He and Anne-Marie breakfast together, but in silence. My father is not a morning person. They drove to Capitol Hill together, probably also in silence. Since then, Anne-Marie has found her voice. She became a professor at Princeton and the dean of her alma mater, the former Woodrow Wilson School. She was the first woman to head the State Department's Bureau of Policy and Planning, and she wrote a powerful book, Unfinished Business, about women, men, work, and family. Now, Anne-Marie is the CEO of New America, a new kind of think and action tank. So thank you, Anne-Marie, for joining us today.
Never follow a British speaker, even at a memorial service. And on top of that, Andrew has taken what I was going to tell you, but I will start by saying I cannot talk about Pi without first talking about Alfred. As you've heard, I met Alfred first. Alfred, I worked for him at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but his aunt, Helen Baldwin, was also my parents, our next door neighbor in Charlottesville, Virginia. And somehow through that confluence, I did come to live at 3506 Macomb Street, the Yellow House, as I always think of it, for that summer. And as Andrew has related, I came down for breakfast. First day, my somewhat chatty self, and Alfred was there with at least 4 newspapers spread out in front of him as he would go through them systematically. And I think I had the temerity to say something like, "Good morning." And Alfred looked at me and said, "We do not talk at breakfast." And we did not talk at breakfast, and not very much on the drive. We did, however, play tennis together, that wonderful court many of you will remember. And over the course of the summer, we did become friends, very deep friends, so much so that I dedicated my senior thesis to him. In all these encounters, because I met many of you and many of the family, everyone asked about Pi. Everyone sent their love to Pi. Pi was on the Cape with the boys. So this was this kind of mythical person, Pi friendly. The name itself is a warm embrace, as we've heard. But if meeting Alfred and becoming friends with Alfred is like, it's like a flower slowly unfurling. You might think of an amaryllis, say, during the holidays. Gradually, but beautifully. Meeting Pi was like being handed this enormous bouquet of flowers, full of beauty and energy and an expression of warmth and hospitality and instant friendship. In our household, Pi and Alfred is one word, because they complemented each other so perfectly in the ways I've described and many others. I also, though, as I think about Pi, I want to celebrate her as a fellow Southerner. I grew up in Charlottesville, Virginia, but with a Belgian mother. I didn't really think of myself as a Southerner. But over my lifetime, I've come to realize that Southerners have this extraordinary quality of being able to remember everything, to trace genealogies back decades, centuries, to remember great-great-uncle Horace, or your best friend's third cousin twice removed, Sally. I had that ability. And when I was with her over the many, many years of our friendship, I would be reminded of my grandmother, who came from generations of North Carolinians, and of course Pi came from generations of South Carolinians. And that extraordinary ability to remember, to put together, that ability was an ability to fit everyone into her life, to leave no one behind. And indeed, as Alfred wrote on Caring Bridge, Pi had the ability to meet people and instantly fold them into the large and complicated tapestry of their lives. And all of us have felt that and been a part of it. It was Pi's gift. I have to also remember her as it was a particularly Southern gift. No one gets forgotten. She was also Southern in another way. She wasn't quite a steel magnolia. But when I read the first chapter of Cokie Roberts' book, Founding Mothers, it opens, the first chapter is the story of Eliza Pinckney. Eliza Pinckney, who was the mother of Charles Cotesworth Pinckney and Thomas Pinckney, both of whom were founding fathers. She describes Eliza Pinckney at age 16 running her father's plantation entirely on her own, planting things, experimenting with things, taking care of children, taking care of everything, and ultimately inventing the commercial agriculture of indigo. When I read that, I thought of Pi's ancestry, as she is a direct descendant, and I could see the inheritance of determination, of adventurousness, and much of Pi and Alfred's life is the story of wonderful adventures and an amazing ability simply to get things done. I cannot talk about Pi's Southern heritage, or indeed my own, or any of ours, without also recognizing those who were left out, those who were oppressed, those who we now must make a place for also in a far fuller history. I mention that because Pi understood that too, and was very aware of how those of us whose ancestors enslaved others have a duty to tell that fuller history and to make reparation. I want to close with a reflection on Pi's career. Alfred and I have been having a conversation about whether Pi had enough of the career we heard about at the outset, the career she might have chosen to pursue had she been born, say, 20 years later, as I was. In the spring of 1966, Pi, and these are Alfred's words, escaped Richmond. A sentiment I remember all too well as a smart girl who wanted to escape Charlottesville. She escaped to a pretty terrific job. She was the assistant curator in MoMA's architecture division. That is a dream for someone with the love of history and art and architecture that Pi had. We can imagine where that career might have led. But as Alfred writes in the program, Pi left that job in April 1967, just really a year later, because he had asked her to join him with a one-way ticket to Turkey. She didn't go back to that job, and she did not go back to paid work until the 1980s, when she got a master's in American history and began work paid and later unpaid at the Portrait Gallery. Did Pi sacrifice her career for her family? Well, the young woman who worked for Alfred in 1979 would have had no doubt about how to answer that question. Absolutely. She had this extraordinary career and she gave it up to marry and to then raise her family. I'm far less sure of that answer today. Pi traded outside work that she loved for outside work and possibly acclaim for inside work that she loved and for deep personal relationships. And she did love it. I'm going to quote from a letter that Alfred sent me that Pi wrote her mother in July 1967, just 2 months after she was married, and a few weeks after arriving in Lagos, which is, as we've heard, quite a task to move a family. She wrote, "I am really hooked on this housewife bit. Poor Alfred is staggering under this wave of domesticity. My conversation is limited to colors, mechanics, and prices. I can see why Bryn Mawr says only our failures marry. I am the #1 dropout from the intellectual ranks, but Lord, how I love it." And you can see from the quality of her writing that that was clearly not true. I look around now at what her work produced. A wonderful family, a web of love and support, a wealth of friendships, all of you and the many, many people who are not here, but were with Pi, at least virtually, through her final days. A legacy of warmth and joy. As we grow older, we ask ourselves what the good life is. A life of meaning and purpose. None of us has a definite answer. In the choice we all make between care and career, Pi chose to weight the balance of her life more toward care. Career is recognized and remembered in words, in books, in plaques, in exhibition catalogs. Care is recognized and remembered in our hearts. Hi, Friendly, we hold you in our hearts, and in your children's hearts, and your children's children's hearts, and their children's hearts, and in the South for centuries to come.
Well, now, lastly, Kelly and my daughters, Catherine and Caroline, who are the next generation of strong women, will come. They called Pi Nona, probably because she needed yet another name. But it was by her request, and probably because she still dreamed that she would return to live in Italy. Okay?
As everyone here knows, life was more exciting, more interesting, and for us, most instructive, when our Nona Pi was on the scene. She had a way, sometimes a very particular way, of doing things, and so Catherine and I have put together a non-exhaustive list of rules for a divine life, both uttered and observed by the one and only Pi. Rule number 1, the world is wide, go and meet it. Nona was adventurous. She always told us stories of her time in Florence or backpacking through Europe with her brother Tommy and Helen Scott. She lived with Alfred in Lagos, Rome, Belgrade, and Moscow, and traveled to countless other places, including Tunisia with Chris and Kasha. She rafted down the Grand Canyon with her parents. She and Alfred took us for Christmas holidays to Seville, Tulum, Paris, and Guadeloupe, just to name a few. She inspired our love for adventure and travel. Rule number 2, strangers are just friends you haven't met yet. Nona taught us to never be afraid to talk to anyone. She never was, and it was often hard to stop her. Throughout her life, she collected people. In Chatham, we saw firsthand when she befriended a group of men who used to hang out in the mornings at the lighthouse overlook. Every morning, they would chat standing around the back of their pickup trucks, and she joined them and quickly became friends, as did everyone with Nona. If she ever skipped a day, they'd come to the house to check on her. I vividly remember beach trips, where we were all quite content sitting in the sun, reading our books, and playing backgammon with Alfred. After a while, she would get bored with us and journey down the beach on an expedition to find new friends. She would come back and say, I met the most interesting couple. They're coming over for drinks at 6. Someone was always coming for drinks. She truly embodied what it meant to be a friendly. Rule 3, to be interesting, be interested. Reading the Washington Post and the New York Times was a prerequisite before going to any dinner party so that you could converse intelligently. She expected you to sing for your supper, and rightly so. I was so lucky to have lived with her and Alfred during her last few months while interning at the Treasury Department. Every day, I came downstairs and saw her sipping coffee, eating yogurt, and scouring the paper cover to cover. I quickly learned that I needed to do the same to keep up with conversations. Rule number 4, spend more time in a swimsuit than your clothes. Catherine and I calculated that most of the time we spent with Nona, we were in swimsuits. We instantly absorbed her love of all things chocolate, including chocolate from the candy counter. We loved spending our summers with her on our Boston Whaler, named after her mother, Bubbles. She showed us that life is always better in the sun, on the water, and wearing a swimsuit. Rule number 5, there are essential elements to a successful cocktail party. Uncle Chris and I both have August birthdays, so we were lucky to celebrate in Chatham with her. It wasn't unusual for Nona to propose a gathering with all the ladies over 80, and she would put a candle in a wheel of brie cheese. Good parties were always multi-generational, and she would instruct the younger generation to pass the hors d'oeuvres. "Darling, make me a cracker," was a constant refrain. Rule number 6, manners matter. You weren't born in a barn. To make people feel welcome and to make life more beautiful, Nona had certain distinguishing touches. She cared very much about blackening every candle wick and setting the table with linens and silver, pomegranates and shells. When you came to stay, there were always fresh flowers on your bedside table, even if they had been stolen from a neighbor. My father and Chris, and later Catherine and I, were frequently reminded to never put our elbows on the table, always remove from the right, and never stack plates. She even once told me that I was twisting my pasta wrong, and if I didn't learn to do it properly, I would never have an Italian boyfriend. And speaking of Italian men, Rule 7, a kiss may be fleeting, but Poochie is forever. This is one of our favorite stories. You can just imagine the scene as Betsy tells it. Pi and Betsy in their early 20s, sitting in a leafy Italian piazza overlooking Florence and having lunch. They notice some handsome Italian gents giving them eyes across the cafe, and Betsy places a bet. If you go and sit on their lap and give one a kiss, I will buy you a Poochie scarf. Of course, Nona accepted, and here's the proof. Rule 8. Clearly a sister is always the best partner in crime. In our Nona's eyes, nothing went better with a glass of white wine and a few cashews than fresh gossip. Betsy called Nona every morning to check in, perhaps worried that they might have missed some overnight scoop. Even in her final days, when Betsy came to visit at Sibley Hospital, Nona asked, "Got any gossip?" I think we can safely assume everyone in the room has been discussed at one point or another. And the two of them. If we weren't, shame on us for not being interesting enough. Nona had a tendency to embellish and tell some pretty amazing stories. Her only problem was being married to a reporter who liked to stick to the facts. When Nona died, Betsy was right by her side, holding her hand. Two sisters together to the end. Catherine and I can only wish her as much. Rule number 8, be generous with your time and money. Nona was incredibly generous and always assumed the best of everyone. One of the friends she made included the checkout lady at the Giant on Wisconsin Avenue. After learning that the woman and her son hadn't had a summer vacation in years, Nona offered the Chatham House for a holiday. She gave us our beloved dog Izzy because she thought the children needed to grow up in a home with animals. Other Christmases, our gifts were cows or goats for children in developing countries. In her house, the animals ruled. The dog tracked in mud and left black hair everywhere. The cat slept next to her and was allowed to drink cream out of a silver antique pitcher during after-dinner coffee. They were clearly exempt from the manners lesson. She and Alfred also supported our education. She had such a strong connection to her all-girls school, St. Timothy's, that she wanted something similar for us. She and Betsy, and sometimes John Brown and Catherine, would break out in St. Timothy's cheer. I thought I heard my grandmother say with a vivo, and a vivo, and a vivo vivo fun. Rule number 9, give a damn as well as your time, energy, and resources. Lip service isn't enough. You must take action. Put your efforts towards the things that matter. For her, sometimes the fight was local, as with the drawbridge in Chatham, along with her friends in the historical, or as we teased, hysterical society. They proposed that the town and the Army Corps of Engineers could design their functional, enduring steel drawbridge, but they had to cover it in wood to make it look and sound historic. The Corps of Engineers actually fell for a clever workaround, and now Chatham is all the better for it. Sometimes the fight was national, as with her devotion to Planned Parenthood, her support of Democratic candidates, up and down the ballot. She taught us it's always worth fighting for, and it's your job to do it. Rule 10, gather the ones you love. Our last days with Nona included one of her signature multi-generational cocktail parties. We gathered 3 generations strong at Lorna Mack's house in Chatham with Carrie and Doug, our parents and Uncle Chris, and me, Caroline, and Mel. She rarely turned down an invitation to a party, and she would be so sad to miss today and all of you. She was the ultimate hostess who had gathered us all together for one last great party. We have had a rough 3 months of loss and grieving both of our beloved grandmothers. Alfred and I have some disagreement over what happens after you're gone for this earthly place. I like to imagine both of our grandmas enjoying a glass of white wine and watching over us. But Nona used to tell us that she wanted to come back in her next life as an egret. Because egrets have long, skinny legs, very thin necks, and beautiful, beautiful white feathers. And, importantly, they spend their summers in Chatham and migrate to the Caribbean for the winter. Just after Nona died in July, we took a boat ride with our mom on the Chatham waters that she adored. As we rounded the bend in the mill pond to head under the semi-wooden bridge that she helped preserve, there on the banks of the shore was a very, very small baby white egret. And for us, it was a sign that Nona will always be with us. Thank you, Nona, for all that you've given us. You were singular, bar none, and positively divine.
Never follow granddaughters. My mother was obviously a people person. Thank you for being the people that mattered to her and that matter to us now. Thank you for coming to share in our memories, our tears, and our smiles. Thank you on behalf of my father, Kasha, Andrew, Kelly, Catherine, and Caroline. Thank you to Kim and to everybody at the National Portrait Gallery, Charles and Anne-Marie. She would have loved this. After a bit of music, please join us for some food, drink, and conversation, and a bit of the cheer and the tears that my mother loved. The food is actually the creation of my cousin Oliver, and he has included a bourbon-laced sweet potato pie. With over, well, I won't tell you how much bourbon he told me he put in. There is also a delicious sweet made by Pepe Mankaya, the chef at Crane's just across 9th Street, my mom's favorite restaurant and her favorite dessert. On the tables over there are some pomegranates, the fruit for which Side, the Turkish town where my parents were married, was named. We hope that you'll take them home with you. One pomegranate has already been planted in the backyard of my home street, and I'm sure my mom would love the idea of more and more of them spreading out with all of you. If you want to stay after the party ends at 11 o'clock, please do so. But since the portrait gallery itself is closed to the public at 11:30, please stay in the courtyard. Of course, if you wait until 11:30, you're welcome to visit the museum that my mother lived. And now to close on a high note, literally, please listen to my cousin Alex Fremley as she sings a song that was among my mother's favorite.
words will come out right now. We can make it so. Someone is on your side. No one is Now, please enjoy coffee and delicious food.